Hello and welcome to Analysis with me, Jonathan Steele. The Labour MP for Birmingham Ladywood, Shabana Mahmood, has called for a public inquiry into the deaths of 3 young men during the 2011 Birmingham Riots. The men were flung 3 metres into the air after being hit from behind by a speeding car in what the prosecution said was a modern-day equivalent of a chariot charge. 8 men were charged with the murders, but the judge had to dramatically halt the trial in April 2012 when it emerged that West Midlands Police had offered witnesses immunity from prosecution without disclosing this to the court, as required. The judge had to order the jury to disregard some of the evidence, and the men were then all cleared and set free. The Independent Police Complaints Commission were brought in to investigate the conduct of these officers. And the report found that a senior investigating officer had promised immunity to certain witnesses, but will not be disciplined as he has already retired. Ms. Mahmood's request comes after that police watchdog investigated the behaviour of individual officers during the investigation into the deaths, as it raises more questions than it answers, in their words. To discuss whether a public inquiry is now needed in this case and issues around bringing police officers to account are Dr. Tim Parsons, who's a senior lecturer in policing and criminology at London Metropolitan University, Raymond Bennett, Joint Secretary of Unite Against Fascism, and Professor Bill Bowring, Professor of Law at Birkbeck College, University of London. And on the phone, we're joined by Tariq Jahan, father of one of the 3 young men who were killed during those riots in 2011. Welcome to the programme. But first, before we come to the discussion, let's have a look at this video report.
Police officers who led the investigation into the deaths of 3 men during the 2011 riots in Birmingham will not face any action over the failure to secure convictions. The investigation from the Independent Police Complaints Commission came after the trial judge accused the lead investigator of lying an oath during the trial of 8 men accused of running down the 3 victims. All 8 men were acquitted by the jury. Tariq Jahan, the father of one of the victims, said he had lost faith in the justice system. Jahan was hailed as a hero after he pleaded for calm after his son's death during the Birmingham riots in 2011. In a recent interview, Tariq Jahan said he felt used and that he had been cheated of justice.
I had just lost my son. The police were using me to quell the riots. They put me up on a platform and used me to promote non-violence. My mistake was that I had faith in the justice system. I expected to get justice, and all I got was a slap in the face.
The Birmingham MP Shabana Mahmood has written to the Home Secretary demanding a public inquiry into the death of the 3 men, as the IPCC report leaves many questions unanswered.
You don't leave that report thinking you understand exactly what happened, who did what and when in relation to the police investigation and then the court case, the prosecution that took place as well, which ultimately failed. And during that prosecution, let's not forget, a judge actually called DCI Tag, one of the chief officers in this case, who said that he had lied on oath. That is a really big deal. And I think that that on its own is enough to say, actually, something's gone horribly wrong here and we need some proper answers.
The IPCC report said Mr. Tag had no case to answer for misconduct. In a statement, the West Midlands Police said,
"The independent investigation shows that no officer from West Midlands Police deliberately misled the trial at Birmingham Crown Court."
And adds,
"The force has already taken steps to strengthen some of these procedures we have with other criminal justice partners. The learning from this investigation has to be built into future training of all senior investigating officers."
Mr. Jahan has criticised the report for leaving more questions than it answers, calling into question the efficacy of the IPCC to hold police to account.
My own view about the IPCC is that it should be abolished. And I think it needs to be replaced with a much stronger, more powerful standards authority, one that can bring its own prosecutions, launch its own investigations, and if necessary, be in a position where they can require an entire police force to take remedial action. I think that's what's really necessary. And actually, the report they produced last week just goes to prove that point in my view.
A number of social commentators have pointed out that the riots in 2011 arose from community tensions with police, and many are concerned that if justice is not served, tensions might arise once again. Flaminia Jambalvo, Islam Channel.
Okay, well, Mr. Jahan, we were quoting you there saying that you've lost faith in the justice system. What do you want to happen now? Do you want a public inquiry? What's your proposal?
I do. I'd like a public inquiry to look into why these failings took place. I was seeking justice right from the beginning. I wanted justice for the 3 men that were mowed down in 2011, and in that, I'm trying to get some transparency to why this case collapsed, what were the reasons, who was responsible, and to actually hold some people accountable.
Well, how far do you think you've got in getting a public inquiry? I mean, the Labour MP we saw there, she's in favour, but have you got any other powerful supporters?
I have indeed. I've got quite a few supporters, but I don't want to mention any names just yet. There are a lot of people behind the scenes working on this, and there are quite a few MPs that are stepping forward now. I don't want to reveal anyone's name, but they will do themselves in a short period. Right now, there's a lot going on in the background, and we're still looking for a reply from Theresa May, the Home Secretary, as in regard to whether there will be an inquiry or not.
And is there any possibility of a retrial of the people who were acquitted?
Well, having spoken to some of the legal profession, a lot of people are telling me unless there is new compelling evidence, there won't be a reason for any new trial.
So that leaves it more likely that you'd get the inquiry than a trial at this stage, is it?
That's right. Right. You're more liable to see a public inquiry than you are to see a retrial, because the trial took its course. According to the law, the trial went its full course, and the judge didn't stop the trial at the time.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Let me put some of these points to Dr. Tim Parsons. I mean, is it normal for the police themselves, for the police to offer people immunity witnesses without consulting the prosecution itself?
No, I mean, having read, accounts of what happened, I'm absolutely astonished by it, to be quite honest. You've got a relatively junior-ranking police officer, detective inspector, offering this immunity from prosecution. As you say, no reference to the Crown Prosecution Service. It's for the CPS to make decisions about who is or is not prosecuted and who may or may not be offered immunity. So the whole sort of decision-making process around this I find quite astonishing.
I mean, the argument seems to be whether a senior officer was consulted or not, because only one officer might have taken the decision. But even if the senior officer had been consulted and said yes, from what you're saying, that would have been extraordinary anyway.
Well, yes. I mean, hopefully, if the senior officer had been consulted, he would have said no. It's not exactly clear to me, at what point this, or to what level this decision was escalated to. But it seems to me that any decision around immunity from prosecution, particularly in a particularly sensitive and politically contentious prosecution like this, must have been referred to the Crown Prosecution Service.
Well, Bill Baron, let me come on to you with a legal point. I mean, this officer who gave the offer of immunity has now retired, and so he can't be disciplined. I mean, is this also kind of thing that happens quite a bit, that people escape disciplining by just simply retiring?
I can't tell you cases off the top of my head, but they certainly have occurred, yes, for sure. And people do retire for that kind of reason.
But I mean, if he hadn't retired, could he still not be charged, they reduce his pension or something,
yes.
Take some sort of action, even though he's retired?
Exactly, yes. I mean, there's a problem here, I think, with what happens to individual police officers in this situation. But the problem, I think, is a deeper one, of course, and I'm sure you'll come to this, with the IPCC itself.
Well, that's what I think perhaps Wayman could answer. I mean, what do you think about the IPCC?
I think, to be honest, let's be honest, this was the body that investigated Mark Duggan's death that sparked off the sad events that led to the riots taking place, and it completely failed. And I think we have to be very clear. It failed what happened around Mark Duggan. It's failed another family inside Birmingham. And really, we do need a public inquiry about these whole issues, because I think these things need to be unravelled. They are also connected as well with what happened, the IPCC in question, into the deaths in custodies that have taken place. All these links show a kind of a disregard for the families and an attempt really to maintain the status quo without getting to the heart of the truth of the matter. And I think it's a matter of urgency that justice delayed is justice denied. And I think that's why we have to move on this.
On any issue which is extremely controversial like this, people will say the IPCC has made a mistake and done, not given people the justice they deserve. But aren't there cases where the IPCC has actually, come down against the police and produced judgments that you liked? I mean, it's not always in favour of the police and against the public.
Yeah, I worked with the IPCC over the case of Roger Sylvester, which they found that the police officer had acted unlawfully, and also in the case of Joy Gardner. But in both those cases, the evidence were given did not lead to a conviction or did not lead to suspension. And I think that we have to be very clear that it's not got either the teeth or the ability to deliver the justice that people who are questioning the justice system want. And in that case, we need to have a robust system that is transparent and clear to everybody that their justice that they have asked for is done in a prompt and effective manner.
And Dr. Tim Parsons, I mean, do you also agree that the IPCC seems to be rather more weighted in favour of the police than the victims?
Well, I don't think that would be the view of the police. I think the issue with the IPCC is, clearly it needs improving. It perhaps needs greater powers. There have been failings with the IPCC with some of the investigations that they've dealt with. I think it's quite wrong for politicians to say, let's abolish the IPCC. And replace it with what? You've then got to start all over again, setting up another investigatory body from scratch. Why not put the resources and the effort into strengthening and improving the IPCC, rather than these rather sort of puerile calls for just abolishing it? I can't see what that is going to deliver
how would you
for the public.
What would you suggest?
Well, I mean, it probably needs a review of its structures, of its powers, of its performance to date. But that needs to be done in a fairly sort of calm and detached way. Perhaps by people external to the IPCC, whether that's the Home Affairs Select Committee or an oversight body set up by Parliament. But I think it's far too simple to say let's just abolish it and start again. Because you're going to be back to square one essentially. Trying to make something work from scratch, and I can't see that that's going to, deliver what people are asking the IPCC to do.
Well, Bill, I mean, on this particular case, just coming back to the detail of this case, do you think there should now be a public inquiry because of that trial sort of basically collapsing?
Yes, but if I could just go back one step as well, which is that the Home Affairs Committee at the beginning of last year published a devastating report on the IPCC, actually having had, a very thorough hearing, and published not only the devastating report, but a whole series of recommendations. And what I think is really significant about that, I mean, they said this is grossly underfunded, has no powers in comparison with police forces. The chair of the IPCC, Dame Anne Owers, went public saying she absolutely agreed with what the Home Affairs Committee had said. And Anne Owers actually is somebody who was Director of Justice previously, leading human rights NGO. She was a very effective Chief Inspector of Prisons, actually, and very hard-hitting. If she says that the body which she chairs is grossly underfunded and not fit for purpose in its present form, I think that really has to be taken notice of. And of course there has to be a public inquiry. And what is, to my mind, also absolutely tragic is that at the time Tariq Jahan was held up by the Daily Mail. I was just reading A.M. Wilson's article from 2011 praising him to the skies because of his religion and because of the fact that he was prepared to go through the IPCC and put his faith in the procedures offered to him. And as he says, he's been completely let down.
Well, Tariq Jahan is still with us on the line from Birmingham. I mean, what's your view now of the IPCC? Do you think it should be abolished or strengthened or replaced or what?
I personally think it should be strengthened. They should be given more powers. And I don't see, what I don't like is... Hello?
Sorry, I think we may have lost you.
Yeah.
No, you're back now. Yes, continue, please. We can hear you now.
The IPCC should be given more powers, And the other thing, I think, it's what I hear a lot from the public outside is that it's the police policing the police. We should have independent bodies that work for the IPCC, not the police or members of the police, retired police force officers dealing with the IPCC. It seems a bit, to put it a little phrase, it seems a bit dodgy that the police, the police are not really the best people to be doing this job, in my opinion.
Well, they are independent, are they not, Dr. Parsons?
Yes, I mean, there is a bit of a dilemma here because people are uneasy with the idea that there are ex-police investigators working in the IPCC. Clearly that's going to raise issues in the public mind. The other side of that is that if you're going to investigate the police, then you need people who understand how the police work, where they're going to find the things that they're looking for, and how to deal with the police organisation. So, whilst I accept that there is a tension there that probably many members of the public feel uneasy with, I can't see that there's a particularly easy fix to that, because if you say the IPCC is going to be equipped with investigators who are not former police officers, then who are they going to be?
Mm-hmm. But I mean, in this case, did they actually interview this man who's retired, or did they not even have the chance to interview him because he'd retired and therefore was sort of no longer relevant?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that they've carried out a fairly thorough investigation into this, whilst people may not be entirely happy with their conclusions, I would say that they've investigated the matter in some detail. And carried out a pretty competent investigation in this case.
I mean, Bill Byring, do they have the right, the IPCC, to sort of summon witnesses and to subpoena documents and things, or is it all sort of voluntary?
They don't have the powers that a judicial inquiry would have. I think that's part of the problem, which has been identified.
That's why a public inquiry would be better.
Absolutely, yes. And of course, in the future, a much stronger body of the kind of the IPCC. That is the issue. So I think for Mr. Jahan, of course, it's a public inquiry.
That's the only thing that can satisfy him. Yes, I think he's made that very clear. Mr. Jahan, what you basically want, as you've said before, was public inquiry. I gather he's now no longer on the line, but I think that was fairly clear from what he said. But, I mean, what were the powers that this Home Affairs Select Committee said that should be given and that Anna said she needs?
A whole series of recommendations, really, that this has to be a body which can talk on equal terms to police authorities, where within the police authorities, their own investigating setups, organisations, actually have a lot more resources than the IPCC, which is supposed to be dealing with the whole country. So I think there are fundamental issues about the way that the state sees the role of an independent body to investigate the police. I think all the issues that we've discussed today, that is, can they compel witnesses, can they ensure that disciplinary proceedings or prosecutions happen, and so on. It's been shown very clearly in this case and other cases that has not happened.
Well, the ball is obviously in the politicians' court. I mean, is Theresa May going to support these recommendations? And what about Labour?
Well, of course, it's Keith Vaz, who was the chairman of the Home Affairs Committee, who was very outspoken about this. But I'm afraid that Theresa May does not appear to want to listen to what comes from him or from the committee.
We've had a body, even up the Mark Duggan inquiry, or the inquiry into it, said the body clearly failed, and part of its failure led to severe conflict on these streets of Britain. And we've had an inquiry into Christopher Older, in which the body failed. We've had an inquiry into Stephen Lawrence, in which the body failed, in order to identify.
You mean the IPCC?
The IPCC failed. We've had where part of the judicial inquiry into what happened afterwards, that they had a close relationship with the police, and they accepted what the police initially told them that actually affected the investigation. Now, when something's not fit for purpose, sadly, sometimes you have to have change. And I think part of making sure that these things just do not simply continuously reoccur means a root and branch change. And if we don't do that, then I'm sure we'll be sitting in this studio explaining the next failure as the need for change. But I think at some point we do have to evolve, or actually what we are doing is maintaining the status quo, which is everybody accepts is unacceptable, from the inquiry inside Parliament to the judicial inquiry that took place around Stephen Lawrence. I think all these things we do need a public inquiry in Birmingham, but I also think we need to have a look at the way the IPCC works and make sure that if it doesn't deliver the justice that's required for both the state and for individual families, that we have fundamental change. And I think it's a matter of urgency for Theresa May and for everybody.
Okay, well, on that note, we have to end this first section of the programme. We'll be coming back after the break to discuss the wider issues, why these riots in Birmingham took place and whether we're safe from future riots this summer. So stay with us.